We have a guest in the studio, the Member of Parliament for Molo constituency. Before we welcome and introduce him, he will hear the day's proverb. City.
Yes, the proverbs for the whole of this week are from the country of Mozambique.
Msumbiji.
Okay. Msumbiji. Yeah. Among the many languages spoken. Frelimo. Yes, exactly.
Samora Machel. God.
Msumbiji, that's the name of Mozambique in Kiswahili.
Oh, right.
Now, given the countries that Mozambique neighbors, you will find that the languages are demonstrative of the borders they have. And for instance, you'll find communities in Mozambique that speak Shona, which means they border Zimbabwe. Now, this one is what I found interesting. There are communities that speak Kiswahili and they're saying Kiswahili. I said, yes, because they border Tanzania. Okay? And so on and so forth. Slander by the stream will be heard by the frogs.
Slander by the stream will be heard by the frogs.
Yes. You may think you're alone if you're by a stream, so you and your co-conspirator are busy nattering away and gossiping about someone and speaking ill of them. True, other human beings may not be there, but the frogs are there and they can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
They are of no consequence.
That, I think, is the implication, but are they...
Are they really?
Yes.
Can they repeat what you said?
Yes, they can.
To the other person?
In the lingua franca of the frogs, yes. Braga, Braga.
Oh, beautiful.
Francis Kuria Kimani, MP, Molo constituency. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Great to be here.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you.
That proverb from Mozambique, when you hear it, what's your interpretation of it?
I'm thinking the equivalent of what you have in my community. Like, you should not speak ill of a tree when you're sitting on the roots. Or you should not speak ill of a snake if you are seated near a stone or a rock. So I think this knowledge is synonymous to most of our communities. But most importantly, sometimes you may not know. You know this interesting thing when you find yourself at an airport and you're probably speaking Swahili or your vernacular and you wouldn't imagine there is anyone who will hear what you're saying. Then someone stops in the market like, atunasemaje hapo bro? Shit, this is in London, I shouldn't have had someone
and there you are just talking and blubbering away.
Oh yes.
Mheshimiwa, you're also the chairman of the Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly.
Yes, I am.
This is a very important committee. For those who may not just know the workings of the committee, basically this is the committee that's in charge of thinking about the plans, the economic planning of the country, working hand in hand with the State Department for National Planning, and also looking at finance. And this is how to finance the country's budget and operations. What is the full mandate of the committee?
Thank you very much. I think we'll have to do probably a few days if you have to really go through the whole mandate. But you put it very well. The major function of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning is to bake the cake for the country. What does baking the cake mean? Parliament is a budget-making house. So the different committees on the National Assembly will come up with a budget according to the state departments that they oversight. Then the Committee of Budget and National Planning will now correlate all the reports from all the committees and come up with a budget. Now the Committee on Finance and National Planning now looks at ways to raise revenue to support that budget. And so mainly, if I to put it plainly, then ours is mainly looking at ways, the revenue raising measures for the national government. And then secondly, we are supposed to watch on that, advice on the debt ceiling and what are the options for this, in addition to oversighting various state departments, for example, the Ministry of Treasury and Economic Planning, the Commission of Revenue Allocation, Kenya Revenue Authority, Central Bank, financial, all these matters finance, all those state departments and parastatals that are finance related, then will not report, like will be the one oversighting their decisions and the expenditures. And then of course, as I said, raising revenue for the country, but also in charge of the economic planning of this country, because I think one of the most understated mandates of any government, especially Treasury, has been economic planning. What macro and microeconomic policies are going to put in place to whether it is to spur development growth, or which direction is the country taking in terms of the macro and microeconomic decisions, policies that they're going to make. What are the economic blueprints? Where do you want to be? What should be our targeted GDP growth? How do we achieve that? How do we make sure that we tackle inflation? How do we make sure that the matters of, for example, foreign exchange, like the strength of the shilling and all of that. So it's a whole it's a whole conversation.
It's a basket of things to do.
Yeah, we'd also talk about, for example, one of the other institutions that we oversight is SASRA. And SASRA is a body that oversights SACCOs. So again, we are mandated to make sure that whether it is that the members' deposits in SACCOs are well taken care of, because SASRA is supposed to do their work. Bank supervision is done through central bank, so you'll find sometimes we'll get involved in that. We also involved in the capital. We also oversight the Capital Markets Authority to make sure that all transactions that are done are above board, and there is no monopoly. It's a whole it's a whole conversation we should have for a whole week. It's a lot of things.
Many of the things that of course will directly touch on the Monanchi is what you said, baking the cake.
True.
Baking the cake is looking at the various sources of money that will then finance a budget, key among them being taxation. So you are the people who will determine how we are taxed for a financial year.
Yes, but there's an ongoing conversation. It's not just the Committee on Finance and National Planning, but we're mandated by the Constitution and by standing orders of Parliament now to spearhead the process. So we're going to find in the next few weeks, then the National Treasury will come up with what we call the Finance Bill. So Finance Bill is a bill that proposes several revenue raising measures that we should use now to finance the budget. And once now that bill comes to our committee, the first thing we need to do is do what we call public participation, because our constitution is very clear that you cannot make any decisions without involving the public. And we have got ourselves into trouble because of not doing that. There are very many tax laws, for example, that have been challenged successfully in court because of there not being public participation.
Sufficient public participation.
Yeah. So the committee is going now to go around the country, and then listen to the various stakeholders, all the stakeholders. In fact, it is all stakeholders, because in addition to the physical sitting meetings that have to be gazetted, we must say that we'll be at place X, and this is the conversation that we want to have. Then people can still send in their memoranda through email, and they have to be received and they have to fall part of our report. So after now listening to all these people, then we're going to retreat and make a decision, find out, because the debate on taxes is that you will say no, increase it to 20%. No, this one will say no, we should do it at 15%. Then that one we should say we should do it at 0%. Then we'll compare all the merits and the demerits of all the conversations that are going to be advanced by different stakeholders, and do a report, present it to now the National Assembly, the full House, and hopefully convince the National Assembly to pass the bill. And then when it's signed, and again it's taken for President for accent, and then once the President signs it, then it becomes law.
How do you go through the process? What do you do to go through the process of ensuring that all the stakeholders are informed of the public participation exercises that you wish to conduct? And how do you ensure that they understand the same thing that you are coming to listen to them talk about?
I think pretty much that could also be why I'm here, because once we start now having this conversation, that if you have a view that you need us to know about or to hear, then there is an avenue for you to come and say it. But to answer your question more directly, is that there must be a gazette notice. The sittings of those public participation hearings must be published in the local dailies of national circulation. And I think with 7 days notice at least, so the venue, the subject, the venue and the agenda of the meeting must be advertised in the local dailies, in fact it's all the local dailies with national circulation, and then stating the dates and the time and the agenda, of that meeting, and then anybody desires now to come and contribute to that particular issue just is welcome. But most of the time, for the sake of planning, then would require you to write in advance, so that you're able to allocate and say the media council will present their issues between 8 and 8:30, and ISPAC, the Institute of Central Public Accountants, will probably do this between this and this, and then Uraia Forum will have this, TIFA will have this, all these many stakeholders. But I will say, because I've served in the Committee of Finance and National Planning for the last the whole life of the tour of Parliament, and I saw including very many young people like just make a presentation by themselves, just one young man,
individual citizen, coming,
just individual citizen coming and say, I oppose this or I propose this, and we've had some very brilliant ideas coming from them, and one of the things that I learned was, for example, about the LAFACAV. I am a finance student, but I think I missed that lesson on the LAFACAV. And basically, what LAFACAV is, we were able to demystify the theory that increase in the rate of taxes will lead to increase in tax collection. And that is what the focus has always been. You want to collect more?
So
increase the rates. Increase the rates.
The tax rate, yes.
The tax rate, yes. And someone came and said, no, let me tell you something about LAFACAV. The more you increase the rate of tax, you're going to collect more until a particular time where you're going to plateau. You're going to plateau, and you're going now to start collecting less. And I'm like, perhaps you've achieved that LAFACAV for some of our tax brackets. I think there's some rates that we should not increase them anymore. In any case, therefore, if we want to collect more, maybe we need to reduce the rate of tax. And reducing that rate of tax is not going to make us collect less. It's going to make us collect more.
So if I may jump in and ask then, just looking at some of the things that you've spoken about and talked about public participation, for me, it's really very important. We've seen countries who operate on public participation, that because they realize that government works for the people, then they are going to take the opinions of the people seriously, that they will not spend government money until they essentially get the approval of the people. They will not make decisions when it comes to the legislation for government until they get approval from the people. I mean, there are many countries that do this, and they're very transparent in their workings, so you can actually see how this happens. So how serious then does this committee, does this process take on public participation? Because one would assume that during these forums is where you find brilliant suggestions from people about how you can actually get your development curve moving in an upwardly direction when it comes to this whole budget making process, when it comes to taxes and things like this. How seriously is it taken? And I'm serious about that question. How seriously is it taken?
I may not speak on behalf of others, but I'm going to speak as a chairperson of Finance and National Planning Committee. One of the things I did once I was elected as a chairperson was to look at all laws and all tax, especially all tax laws, that the Committee of Finance and National Planning has been taken to court, and Parliament has been taken to court because of not doing public participation. In a inaugural speech, I told my members, guys, we have to change the way we're doing this. And this is the impact of it. Because once we saw that report, we were able to see that there are so many tax proposals or tax laws or particular taxes that we are supposed to collect because they were approved. But somebody went to court. For example, the Honorable now Senator Okio Mutata, as in, is one of the experts in that field. He went to court and was able to prove that there was no public participation in the passing of that law. And as a result, courts have nullified those taxes. Let me tell you what that means. And I'm going to try and relate that and see how that relates to public debt. We first of all pass what's called the budget estimates, or the budget. We say that this financial year of 2023, we're going to spend 3 trillion shillings.
Yep.
Okay, and we agree. So once the budget is approved by Parliament, the respective departments draw up their plans, whether they're procurement plan, whatever, based on the 3 trillion.
Yep.
But that 3 trillion shillings is based on our ability to finance it.
Finance it, yes.
So before now, at the tail end of the process, the Treasury has to tell us how do we finance this, and that's why I come in. I say the 3 trillion shillings will be financed by. We're going to raise 2.6 trillion. We're going to raise this amount of money through these taxes and probably borrow, X. So, if therefore we passed a particular excise, and therefore the budget was approved based on how much we expected to raise in that excise, then that excess duty is nullified by the courts. Remember, the budget has already been approved.
Yes.
So spending has already started. Commenced. And therefore, governments sometimes have had now no option than now to borrow, whether internally or externally. And therefore, I was able to convince my committee, and we have agreed that actually part of the growing debt is because we are passing these laws haphazardly, in a hurry, forgetting that we have a new constitution and we have a very robust judiciary system where anybody, and I mean anybody, can actually take that matter to court and challenge it. And if they are able to prove that there is merit, that, for example, there was no public participation, or that it's because the two reasons why those laws were nullified by the courts were given 2 reasons. 90% of them, no public participation. The rest 10% was that they were unconstitutional. I know they felt they were able to prove that, but they offended particular aspects of the constitution. And so that's why I took it upon myself and said, we are not going to be doing this anymore, because even by the time that law is coming to be passed, there is a lot of money that will be spent, and you put it very well, in the process, because this public participation forum cost money. These publications in the newspapers and all that cost money. When all these people are sitting there listening and doing the report, a lot of money has been used. So if then that money has been used and that law becomes null and void, then we are wasting public funds.
So what does it mean then, Mheshimiwa? Because you sat in that committee that was the Finance Committee of the 12th Parliament, okay? There was some level of public participation from your defense in court. We publicized this, we put in the newspapers, we held meetings with this and the other. The issue was the threshold of public participation. So now as chairman, what are you setting as a new threshold for public participation? What do you define as public participation?
For you to introduce any amendment or any clause, that particular clause must have been heard in a public participation forum. That was the biggest reason. Because in the process, we would, for example, say we are taxing this...
That Minute Maid juice,
for example. And that's what we engage the public on public participation. Right. This juice is in a plastic container.
Yeah.
And then along the way, we actually realized there is actually another Minute Maid that is not on plastic containers, that is on glass containers. So, and again, remember also this public participation is a process. We are still in the process of making sure that we fully implement the constitution. Public participation is not something that is with us for so long. It's something that we are training ourselves to do that. So we will go and say now, in addition to the juice in the plastic bottles, we are also going to tax the juice in
the glass
in the glass bottles. So that is the basis of a court to nullify. Because when we engaged you, we did not talk about
just the plastic.
We just talked about the plastic, and I was using that as just an example, basic, to show what it is, and therefore that understanding now calls for, because a comma, a full stop, a punctuation mark, sometimes even, because even when we're passing this bill, we will not, in the bill there will not be militaries. It will be a code. Because this, in KRA, this particular product has a code. It's probably 900.1234.678.91011.
Yeah.
So if the end digit there is 11, and whatever you pass is a 12,
That's it.
so we're talking about precision. We're talking about being extremely deliberate in doing things right.
Okay.
And making sure there is no adjustment, there is no there is no any amendment that has been introduced in the process without having involved the stakeholders. And in the event that that there is a necessity to introduce something that was not part of the discussion, then you must bring that aspect to public participation. Again, yes. And I think, I said again, I've been able to see this because I was very active in that committee. I sat through all those sittings. And then sometimes I would be surprised, when the courts now would say that. But then when now reading the judgment and reading the report that was done by the secretariat of my committee, then I was able to see this is why we're doing it wrong. And now I think the first thing is to accept where is a mistake and how to rectify it. So that we make sure that no taxpayers' money is wasted in a law-making process where that law becomes null and void.
Mheshimiwa, let's take a break. It's at 7:30, actually 29 minutes to 8.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Eric Latif, Ndu Oko, CT Muga, and our guest, the Honorable Kuria Kimani, MP Molo Constituency, Chairman, Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly. Mheshimiwa,
Yes, sir.
are Kenyans overtaxed? Are Kenyans overtaxed?
Kenyans are not overtaxed. We just have a few Kenyans paying all the taxes, and many more Kenyans that should pay their rightful share of taxes not paying taxes. That's what is happening. We have those that should pay are not paying, and those that are paying, end up bearing all the burden.
Okay.
Let me give you an example. If you get a job at Southern Media Group, the first thing you are asked to provide is your KRA PIN in addition to the rest.
Yeah.
And your salary is definitely taxed. So you make 30,000 shillings a month. Maybe you're intern, whatever job group that is. Then you actually get to pay, I think it's 4,000 or 5,000 shillings every month, and it's deducted at source by employer. It's not whether you choose or not. It's deducted automatically. You find someone who has, for example, a hardware in River Road, and they turn around 1 million shillings every day. Like the sales alone is one mic. So even if the margin is maybe 20%, that is 200,000. In 30 days, that is 6 million. They operate under a business name. And then, so when they're filing, or even if it's a registered company, when they're filing a return, they file new returns. So someone who is making a profit of 6 million shillings every month isn't paying a dime of taxes. Someone who is employed at Standard Group, earning 30 shillings a month, gets to pay their income tax. That's what you're saying.
Okay.
If we had everybody pay their right share of taxes, then absolutely we wouldn't have to feel the burden. But now the attitude at the past, and that's why I'm happy with the statement by His Excellency the President yesterday, that we're not going to do waivers anymore. Because you owe Kenya Revenue Authority 1 billion shillings, and then you go and apply for a waiver, and you're actually waived off 500 million shillings from your taxes. But is the person who is paying his VAT on sugar when they go to buy sugar in the shop, do they get that waiver? Is you and I who are salaried and get deductions on pay on our monthly salary, on our allowances, on everything, do we get that waiver?
We don't.
And so if we stop, we seal all these loopholes of because the reason why the person making 30,000 shillings a month here pays their rightful pay of tax is they don't know anybody. But a big company, or let me say the big boys, who should pay 1 billion shillings of tax because they can get an appointment with whoever, then they actually get to have a waiver.
So how do we seal those loopholes?
First of all, it's a government adjustment. There must be political goodwill. Let's start from there, and that is a political direction that the president is leading us to. That's now going to lead to a consequent adjustment of the Kenya Revenue Authority, where you don't just walk in and say, guys, I think I need a waiver here. It's like, no waivers. You have to pay your rightful share of tax. And I think that to me is really going to head us in the right direction. We're talking about using now intelligence systems, focusing more on making sure that everyone pays. Let me give an example. We have guys who are doing, for example, contracts with government. And when they do that particular service, especially for supply of services, there's a withholding tax that's withheld from you who did some work with the county of Homa Bay. Now the structural adjustments or the framework or the operational adjustment that KRA is making is to make sure that once Homa Bay County withholds that tax from you, then the system reflects that Nto has been paid 10 million shillings because withholding tax has been paid 10 million shillings and the withholding tax was this much. So you should actually pay this amount of tax from your end. For those, for example, contractors that do or those that do the services of whether it's road constructions and all that, there's a concept that we're calling input and output tax. So the output, the amount of tax they are paying would be cancelled off with the amount of tax they paid as an input tax. Okay, but what would they do? They would go and gather receipts. I never knew why
you prove expenditure.
Yeah, to prove expenditure. So that you and I that don't do business with government, you probably buy your fuel or whatever, and then you have paid a tax on it. Then it was a whole business. It was a whole business enterprise
of
collecting those
receipt
collections. So someone is going on the dustbin and saying a receipt iko na hii ni 800, hii iko na 800, iko na 900 iko, and then they would actually aggregate those receipts and use them to claim input tax. As a result, because they actually not incur that expense in the first place, then they were able to defraud the government of potential, of numerous revenues. And therefore, these are now the things that we're tightening. And as a result, by the way, it also led to inflation. Inflation means where the cost of things were just ballooning. Because if you remember a few years ago, if you went to property, for example, property prices, you find an apartment that probably should cost 5 million is selling at 10. Prices really shot up because there are people who, whether you buy or not, there are few people who actually have the 10 million shillings to buy. That is not decently earned. It's you work.
It's easy.
You work very hard. You are here every morning before 6. Then you research on the show. You're here. You work hard, and then some guys do a lot of nothings, and then they have crazy money. And as a result, they were crowding out. Real business people, and actually leading to inflation. Whether you call them wash or whatever they were called. They drove the prices very high. Because the market, if even they knew the market, the whatever you put in the market, then there will be someone to buy it because they had the money. But you who earns a decent income and who pays your rightful share of tax, who are not able to afford that lifestyle, or not afford to afford those services.
I have to ask you, how, knowing all of this information, from the things that you're telling us now, knowing all of this, knowing that only a percentage of those who pay taxes are actually contributing to this kitty, number one. Number two, there's a whole bunch of others who are not paying, who are not contributing. Are you then saying that if everybody was contributing in the way in which it is envisioned, that everybody would be paying less in what they pay in taxes?
Exactly.
Number one.
Exactly.
Number two, I don't think people would have an issue with how much they paid in tax if they could see the fruits of their labor. A lot of the things that we often hear about, let's look at the public system, because that is government. Right? Not the individuals who have opened up things in the private sector to make things work. In government, and look across board, health, infrastructure, education, agriculture, the things that we've been harping on about for the last however many years. Look at a situation today when 23 counties are affected by drought. Things that happen in other countries. Again, I'm sorry, but I have to go back to other countries. That happen because now when you say the public coffers are then going to be able to take care of that. And these public coffers are often made up by the taxes that their people pay. The problem is that we complain about being overtaxed is that unfortunately sometimes you cannot see, most times, you cannot see the result of this tax, number one. Are there other ways that the operations of government can be funded aside of tax? And is that some of the stuff that this committee that you chair would be able to look into? Because when we talk about a budget and how it is going to then be financed, the majority of the finance comes from taxes. In terms of creativity, in terms of thinking about other things that can be done to fund government, do those things land at the desk of the committee?
Thank you very much. I'm picking your mind, and you're speaking the view of many Kenyans. Most people want to pay their rightful share of taxes, but they really want to see where the government or where that money is going
Value
to.
for money.
And value for money. And if you look, the focus on this Kenya Kwanza government has been mainly on this service delivery. We are going to find, because and the way we are going to deliver that, to have that service delivery, is when we have hardworking government. Hardworking government. It's a way, I used that example earlier, it's the way you guys stand up here early in the morning every day. That's what we want, the hard work from government. And I think there is no room for laxity in this government. We were in a retreat with all this government the other day, and you could see the vibrance and the attention to detail that the president was doing and was holding everyone to account for. And if that continues, and I'm sure it's going to continue, then those issues that you're talking about, you're going to find a very big change, from them. One of the decisions that the president made was the cutting down the budget by 300 billion, and saying we are not going to spend money on things that we should not be spending on. As a result, by us saving the 300 billion shillings, that money has been redirected to other functions that have a direct impact on Wanjiko. Whether you're talking about the Hustlers Fund, whether you're talking about the recruitment of 30,000 teachers, So let me tell you, for example, the creativity that you're talking about, and this, even in terms of what are the priorities of government in their spending. Just by employing the 30,000 teachers, the multiplier effect of that is we're actually going to increase the amount of tax we are collecting. Because we're going to have 30,000 other people
Pay as you earn.
Pay. The 30,000, again, it has a multiplier effect because those people will be deployed from across the country. They're going to rent your apartment in Elbagon. They're going to buy their food they're going to pay their debts and all that. And the multiplier effect of the 30,000 teachers is actually going to be felt. If we increase again the recruitment of our police officers, again, we're also dealing with another problem of unemployment. Outside that, you asked whether there are any creative ways apart from increasing taxes. this government is now very keen on public-private partnerships, PPPs. And you're saying, if we have a private sector investor who wants to come and invest in a public good or public service, as long as there's appropriate measures, then we are going to have the public gaining from that particular service, and we don't have to borrow for that project, and we do not have to increase taxes for it, and it's going to also lead to spur economic growth.
Then why is it? I'm sorry, but I have a book. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think I have to stop on that train of thought. That as we sit here in this room, these are things that are coming from you, and we have nobody to look to. Kenyans have nobody to look to, but for those who are making the laws about how they are going to operate in life. So these are ideas that are coming from you. The thing is that Kenyans want to see these things come to life. How will they actually come to life? We talk about all the time about how the ideas are there. We know what ought to be done, but then not doing them seems to be a problem. In the good book will even call it a sin, that you know what should be done, it is not done, then you're doing something wrong. Why can't we actually see these things happening?
This government is only been 100 days in office, and you're going to be seeing these changes. I'll give you one example. The Rironi Mau Summit Road. It was supposed to be duo. You remember over Christmas we had people literally sleeping on at Gilgil and at all the station. Yeah. So there was a proposal. It's really advanced in terms of dualing that highway. It's going to affect to even pass through my constituency all the way to a place called Mau Summit. That road will open up, South Rift as in big way. It was through a PPP partnership. But once this government started looking at the details of what was on the PPP, then it was actually a rip-off. Right. Because it was to be done at more than double, the cost of which is going to be done. And there was no proper mechanism to know at what point should the road revert back to the people. Because like, for example, once we resume from recess, we are going to start an inquiry onto the revenues that are raised by this Nairobi Expressway. Everyone agrees. Perfect idea. You want to get to wherever you're going faster. Are you willing to pay an extra cost for it? If you are, then there's an option. Use the expressway. Sure. And as a result, when you use the expressway, you actually reduce traffic on Mombasa. As a result, now Mombasa Road has really expanded. If you go to somewhere like Kitengela now, it used to take a lot of time here in Pronongo that, and you're finding now business and settlements and everything growing up on this particular area. However, as we realized, because the essence of this, the PPP on, for example, the Nairobi Express was supposed to be, you are building this road at, I'm just saying for conversion's sake, at 10 billion, for conversion's sake, okay? So you build it at 10 billion, and then you're supposed to recoup your costs from the collections you get by users of these roads. Okay?
Over what period of time?
So those are the questions that...
27 years.
Yes, those are the questions. But you see, it shouldn't even be the number. The question of the 27 years should be, how much have you collected?
Yeah.
So until
you collect this amount plus your interest of this much.
But how do you verify how much they collect? Because they're the ones collecting it, especially when the mode of payment is cash only. So there's no audit trail.
So when we say this, then Mheshimiwa, okay, there is a PPP for the expressway. It's completed. We were at a very advanced stage of getting the Rironi Mau Summit contract done. Which parliamentary committee was responsible for oversighting those and making sure that before anything is actually inked, you have the approval of Parliament?
For the roads, that would be transport.
Okay.
That would be the transport committee.
So then the questions are asked, what happened in the 12th Parliament?
You know what happened?
Because all these things we're talking about happened in the 12th Parliament.
12th Parliament was full of intimidation. It was full of political blackmail. That you made a decision, you made a statement that was unpopular with the government, and the next time the taxman was on your door. And the next time there was a case by DPP.
Are we saying that
and by ACC.
with this government, we will see nothing of that sort?
The promise that we've got, and I really want to hold the president accountable for it, and I'm sure he will keep it, is that he's going to allow everyone to have divergent views, and allow them, and for example, if I diverge a little, this statement will be a little political, but okay.
You're a politician.
And this is the station room anyway. So the visit by His Excellency the President to Nyanza, to Homa Bay and to all that, and I saw the dalliance of my predecessor, Honorable Gladys Wanga, and all these other leaders from Nyanza, and I saw the committee is going to welcome the president, and the discussion was about how economic plans for that region. They didn't have to join government. They didn't have to take up leadership positions. And it has been clear. I want you as opposition to carry out your oversight role without fear, because I want my government to be put to account. And for you even to get development in your areas, you don't need to join government. Tell us when you're doing it wrong. As members of parliament, even for me as a member of parliament in Kenya Kwanza in UDA, he has expressly told us in our meetings, if you find that any of my ministers, any of my PSs, or anyone is doing things wrongly, supporting government does not mean, keeping your mouth shut. It means telling us how and what is going wrong. And for the 3 months, we have actually had 3 PGs, 3 parliamentary group meetings, and one leadership meeting. And in those parliamentary group meetings, they're like conversations, fine. So are there matters that you think, are not going well? And there's that leeway, there's that freedom to say, I think that this direction is wrong. I think that statement, and then we have a conversation about that and we find a solution.
And to peg my question to what you've just said, we have people who don't pay taxes. There are those who have no choice but to pay. KRA are the ones who collect taxes. So if there's this problem, what is KRA's involvement and what has KRA done to ensure, because there's no other agency in the country that collects taxes, it's them. What do they do to make sure that these people who don't pay actually pay? And what does the committee that you head do to ensure, because the loophole has been cited, it is clear. What's the solution?
That is where my role has been cut. And for what do you did in the last 2 months? Because I've only been chair for 2 months. For the 2 months we've done, part of it was the approval of the PSs, the PS Treasury, PS Economic Affairs, the approval of commissioners for revenue allocation. Then we broke on recess. We come back from recess next week. We have a whole week induction, of different experts in all fields, trying to make sure that they equip us with the relevant skills for this job. And then after that, we start with the finance bill. So I think perhaps in the next, when you have this quarterly conversation, then I'll be able to say the progress that we've made.
Okay.
Well, Mheshimiwa, we thank you very much for joining us. And I know there's a lot still to talk about, and especially when you come back now into the recess, from the recess, and you begin looking at the finance committee, we want you to come and we talk about it. Your closing remarks for today.
Thank you very much. Mine is to really thank you for the candid conversations that we have, touching on every subject, and you keep us informed, you keep us on check, you ask us the tough questions, and we have been given the mandate by the people. It is our responsibility to make sure that we answer to your questions to a satisfactory, and even when we don't know the answer, then to go and find about it. I've picked a few things that you've said, and I'm going to, every time we're going to call myself for a meeting, for example, are we doing public participation? Are we doing public participation for the sake of it? Or are we listening to what the people are saying? How do we make sure we stop overburdening people in taxes? How do we make sure that everybody pays the rightful share of tax? How do we make sure we finance a budget outside the normal taxes and borrowing? So I really want to thank you for this show, and you can be sure that where I sit, I'll do my best to get the job done.
We'll hold you accountable for that.
Thank you.
That's the purpose of this show. And welcome again.
Thank you.
The Honorable Francis Kuria Kimani is the chairman of the Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly. He represents the good people of Molo constituency in the National Assembly.
And
You want to
perhaps
do a shout out?
yes,
In 2 seconds.
This is to really thank all the people of Molo. This is the first time ever for the last 30 years that Molo has re-elected a member of parliament. And for the people of Molo, I'm eternally grateful. And I'm going to let you down. I'm not going to let you down. I'm going to get the job done. Thank you.
Very well.